so much. I love you so much. I love you so much. I love you so much.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life? Well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the reflection and extension of you who will be here each Wednesday interviewing a different consciousness changemaker. And on the other 4 weekdays, leading the way to ensure that your perspective is consistently expanded, your vibration is constantly elevated, and your heart is overflowing and full. Also, before we jump into today's episode, I'd like to take about a minute and a half to tell you about a few sponsors that not only help to make it possible to produce this show 5 days a week, but that I'm also genuinely passionate about promoting. The first longtime stellar supporter of the show that I want to mention is Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online with over 8,000 video titles. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. The second sponsor I'm sincerely passionate about promoting is Purium. It's no mystery that bringing your mind, body, and spirit into balance is necessary if a person truly intends to manifest the greatest and grandest version of themselves. So if you've been looking for a way to easily get organic superfoods into your system every day with a simple plan that can help you reestablish a healthier foundation and relationship with food, like I was doing before I found Purium, I highly recommend going to positivehead.com/transformation and checking out the videos and interviews there where I dive deeply into discussions explaining why I take these products every day. And should you ultimately end up on iShopPurium.com to purchase any of their 50 plus amazing superfood products, be sure to use the code POSITIVEHEAD, all one word, for a 25% discount. All right, all you positive heads. On this week's Soul Share episode, I'm very excited to have Ayn Cates Sullivan here with me on the show. Ayn is an author who has won more than 30 literary awards for her works, which is primarily focused on mythology and folklore and sort of bringing that into the modern age. She also has a master's in spiritual psychology and works with individuals who are interested in remembering their inner Grail. Hello, Ayn. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. As I just mentioned, right before we turned the recording on, this is going to be all about the motherland for me. I'm being, 64.9% British and Irish according to my ancestry or 23andMe. So when I first was exposed to your work, I thought it's such an interesting topic, and of course, somewhat extra relevant to me because I've never even been to, Ireland or England. And I certainly, a lot of these legends that emerge and that we all know a little bit about, a lot bit about. So I'm really excited to sort of hear all about them and dive into how, they can actually symbolically represent a lot of what's going on in our own awakening on the planet. Right. And
absolutely.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start though at the very first standard, very predictable question I like to ask everyone. You're in an elevator. The woman next to you looks over, says, "What's your passion?" You have 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
My passion is to awaken the wondrous child within so that we ask questions and maybe answer some questions that help awaken the world.
I love that. I always say I'm the poster adult for childhood, so that answer definitely appeals to me. I love the quote, we don't stop playing because we grow old because we stop playing. And so, this is right up my alley. Good stories of magic and goddesses and heroines and all the things. So why don't we start with a little bit of backstory, though? I mean, you've written over a dozen books, all these literary awards, talking about all this incredible mythology and folklore. How did you end up on this path?
Well, a lot of times these things begin when you're a child. And in my case, I'm in Virginia, and I'm sitting in my grandmother's kitchen, and
where I'm originally from too.
So we have a lot of similarities.
Yes.
So we still have this farm in the family that was a land grant, and the original land grant was from 1668, and the relatives that came over from Northumbria are buried there on the farm.
Wow.
And so there were these wonderful mornings when Nana would be stirring a pot, making some soup, or preparing some sort of lovely veggies from the garden, and she's telling me about the knights of Northumbria. She's telling me about Bamburgh Castle, and the steam is rising, and my imagination is going straight to this place. So, of course, as I got older, I had to go, and I was lucky enough to get a fellowship to Columbia University to get my master's in creative writing, and then I got offered an overseas research award to go to King's College London. I went straight there, of course, and my stipend was I had to collect. This was so much fun. It was right up my alley. But my job was to go collect folklore on the west coast of Ireland.
Wow.
What I did first, of course, knowing my ancestry, was to head to Bamburgh Castle. And I got completely fascinated by the stories of King Arthur and the Ladies of the Lake, and realized these were my people. These are literally my people. So
right.
Then the next thing I do is I wind up getting on a plane. This is great. I go to the west coast of Ireland, and I know that these are tales that were made famous by W.B. Yeats, who's Ireland's most famous poet, or one of them for sure. He's one of the top poets there. And so I'm going thinking, oh, it's going to be crowded, be like a museum. And I get there, and oh my gosh, I'm going down these roads, and there's sheep everywhere, and I can't get through, and I have to ask these farmers on tractors where these different sites are, and wind up quite alone in these wonderful wild places, starting to realize that there's memory in the landscape, and that there are stories that have been told in these places. And sometimes they're for 10,000 years. This story of like the Cailleach, the old woman of the world, will have been told in this cairn. And so it was very exciting for me. So I spent literally 10 years collecting tales there.
Wow, what an epic journey that was for you. I imagine that it kind of reminds me of what you just said. Reminded me, I had Richard Rudd on. I'm not sure if you're familiar with his work or not. He wrote the Gene Keys, and he talks about at the beginning of his whole, hey, give me your backstory. It was him being, from England, I believe, and he was, had a whole download of information that came to him, in sort of a mystical way one morning in his early 20s, and he ended up journeying all around England and actually tapping into some of these stories that had happened in the landscape. Like he was kind of saying the same thing. Hey, there's all this history and this energy there, and these stories that, as I would travel around over several days, that was this epic sort of odyssey for me. I was being shown what had transpired here in the past, and so you kind of triggered my remembering of him telling how that unfolded for him. And so in a sense, you were doing something similar, but slightly different, gathering the artifacts and the tales in a little different way, I suppose. But very cool.
I think if you have some mystical inclination, if you're a bit of a poet or a bard, if you go to that land, it's pretty accessible because you can go to Stonehenge or Avebury, or you can go to Newgrange or La Crue. There are a lot of places where the energy is very powerful. It's very on. If Glastonbury is, there's the tour, people go up the hill, people walk up, and so if you have that kind of mystical inclination, it will open up for you. Martin Shaw is another one that takes people in tents to dream on the landscape, and John O'Donoghue would have understood that. So and anyone interested in Arthurian legend and the quest of King Arthur can go and walk in those places. You can go to Cadbury Castle, and you can you can fly up and you can look at the Glastonbury Zodiac, and so it really can come alive for you. And enchanted in that particular place, the idea of an enchanted world isn't very far away. It's right there. You can stand, where Tintagel Castle was, which is where King Arthur was born. And you can stand there and look in the Cornish coast at the waves crashing against the walls of the coast, and you can just imagine. It's easy to imagine when you're there. It's right there. Right. Walk into Merlin's cave.
Right. Super cool. So you have written quite a few books surrounding this topic, and one is the Legends of the Grail. Maybe it'd be great time for you to just tell us a little bit about your books.
Okay, well, Legends of the Grail it's really a series. You don't have to read it in order. You can pick up any of the series, but when I started my own quest, I thought of the Grail as the missing feminine. So, at the time, I'm an actress, right? At the time, I was an academic. So I'm at King's College London. I was teaching some classes, working as an editor, and very very aware of Arthurian legend. What I love about the hero's quest, but there was something missing, really missing, and it was bothering me. I started going to Wells. The one that really started opening up the journey was the Chalice Well in Glastonbury. And I wanted to find the feminine face of the divine. I wanted, why am I a woman? Why have I come through in this gender? I'm going to the library. This was 35 years ago, too. So they were all men. Well, they were all these gray-haired men and then this blonde,
Right.
And if I'm in Trinity College, there's a beautiful library there, and you walk through, and it's all busts of white men, and which was great. It was great, but I was like, do I fit? Why do I matter? Why am I here? Why am I doing this? And so I started going on the journey of the Grail Maiden. So this is a heroine's quest, which is different. The hero's quest, you're challenging yourself to discover who you are. You're developing your ego. You're developing your voice. You're developing your mission. Maybe you're saving the world. But on the heroine's quest, something different's going on. And what you're doing is you're developing your clairvoyance, your clairsentience, and your clairaudience. In other words, you're developing your clear hearing, your clear seeing, your clear feeling. You're going and you're peering in. You're becoming more receptive, and you can feel kind of crazy at first when you do this because in truth, you begin to feel presences, these beautiful, loving presences. And so there's a story of a terrible king named Mangans, and he goes through the countryside. And so in that particular time period, or about 5th century, the knights would go to the Grail Maidens, and the Grail Maidens would give them a sip of a cup by a well. And the sip was really a taste of their soul, a taste of their wholeness, their true nourishment. But a Mangans, and if you think of his name, it's a man gone.
Interesting.
And his
it's
men
like
go
Bernie.
and they
It's like Bernie Madoff. He made off with everyone's money. I love it when the names like line up. It's like, all right, I see you.
There was something missing in that man. He had not done his quest properly. And so he's kind of responsible. Not even kind of. He's responsible in a way, as well as some other characters, Balin and so forth, of creating the wasteland. And it applies now because, if we're a leader who dominates and bullies and controls and harms, you create imbalance and upset, and the whole world goes out of balance. So there's this wonderful tradition in the Celtic lands that the goddess has to come forward. For a man who wants to be a leader, a hero, king, the goddess has to step out of the well and say, yes, here are your hallows. Here's your sword. Here's your cup. Here's your spear. Here's your stone of destiny. Please lead. And if she takes that away from you, good luck. You're not going to get very far, right? So I love these tales. So I went through, and I went through Scotland, through England, through Wales. Wales is also wonderful, and through Ireland also to these sacred wells and springs, collecting the tales of the feminine. And in the first book, Legends of the Grail, Stories of Celtic Goddesses, these are mostly Irish goddesses. And what's wonderful about the west coast of Ireland is that, first of all, there was no Roman invasion there. So the mythology of the people was not wiped out. It's still there. There were a variety of invasions that tried to wipe it out. The Normans, the Britons, the Vikings, all kinds of things. But and even at one point, if you
they
spoke
had lucky
Gaelic,
leprechauns.
They did. But at one point, if you spoke Gaelic, you could be killed, or if you.
Wow!
So amazing that the story survived. So you get some like the 10,000-year-old story, the story of the Cailleach. And when I ran into this tale of Loughcrew, now you go to some of these places, and they are seriously mystical. Like Loughcrew, the first time I went up, it's February, the wind's blowing, it's raining a little bit, it's cold. There's maybe a sheep, there might be a bird. Otherwise, you're by yourself. And you if you're lucky, you can find your way into these old cairns. Now the cairns are stone circles, but they have a top on them. So in some of the traditions, you actually squeeze through. Sometimes you have to crawl on your belly to get inside of these places. And so you feel like you're going back into the womb. You're crawling back inside the Great Mother. And when you get inside, a lot of times there are 3 chambers. Like if you go into Newgrange, you would see that there are these 3 chambers. And sometimes they call them, they thought of them as burial sites. But if you really go in with your mythic imagination, you realize it's not really what's going on. That they're actually womb sites. And it's where you return to the Great Mother to remember the dreams of the earth. And so if you go in respecting the old woman of the world, and sometimes in your mythic imagination, you can imagine stirring her pot of seeds, all of the potential for everybody in the world. She's stirring that. And you can begin to dream with her. At that point, you can tell stories. And so I think one of the reasons there's so many fantastic Irish writers and singers and dancers, and why they have the dancing leprechaun, and why the fairy folk are still talked about there, is because it's really close. The veil's very thin there, and you can tap into the giggles, into the these other worlds. They're called the other worlds.
Wow, pretty amazing. It's what comes up for me, of course, as you talk about this. I hear a lot these days about goddesses and this whole, you're in an age of sort of the Me Too movement and the divine feminine sort of coming back into its power. It appears, and I'm glad to see. I actually just saw someone posting, talking about a friend of mine posting how the happiest places to live are, they just did some survey in what they consider the most well-adjusted countries are all ones where they've had a woman leader, or they, something to that effect. And so there's really a feeling of that sort of taking place on our planet, where the feminine is coming back into its power. And I've heard it said before that we go through these cycles where, you hear about these like 13,000 year cycles, and we've just come out of one where, the sort of the end of the Mayan calendar time was like now the beginning of the new time where, we spent 13,000 years where the masculine dominated, and now the feminine energy is coming forward. You hear a lot about goddess energy, certainly in my, I spend a lot of time in going to transformational type festivals like Burning Man-esque kind of stuff. And there's a lot of talk about goddesses and goddess energy. And so I'm curious, what you think about that and how it all plays in.
Well, two things. I was, first of all, so excited to find these ancient goddesses that have remarkable powers and essences. And the other thing is I have a son who was saying, well, these goddesses are great, but what about me? And I think that's also legitimate. So that's right why I'm working on Kings and Heroes right now. So one of the things that's really important in the Celtic system is that they were all about equality. And I love that. I really love that. Wow. The powerful women of the age of that era, they might be druids, or they might be judges or midwives. They might be warriors. They served in all different areas with the men, and then they were very respected. And I absolutely loved it. So in this tales of the goddesses, you find one of the things you might really love this too, since it's also your tradition, is the most famous of the Irish heroes was a fellow named Cuchulainn. Have you ever heard of him?
No, I have not.
A lot of people know Finn McCool, who was also very famous. But this Cuchulainn of Merhevna was like the Irish Achilles. He was the great warrior. But the tales show us how he became who he was. Now he wanted to marry the most beautiful woman of Ireland, and her name was Emer. And she was lovely, and she was very intuitive, and she really understood the swan song, and she understood the way that the world works, how the tapestry of the stars sing this world into being. But when he asked for her hand, she laughed and she said, "No, I can't do this until you become who you're really supposed to be." So if you're really truly Cuchulainn, if you're really truly a hero, you have to go to the Isle of Skye and meet Skyach. And of course, it always in Ireland that would bring a shudder, because Skyach is a goddess, a warrior goddess who lives in the Isle of Skye. But Cuchulainn wants to marry Emer. So of course he gets in his boat and he sets sail and he gets to the Isle of Skye. And in order to get to the island where she is, you have to jump a 22-foot ravine. Wow. There's a bucking bridge first, and then a 22-foot ravine. Ravine. If you look down, there's skulls and bones of the people who haven't made it. Right? But he does it. He knows how to do the salmon leap, and he makes it. And there she is with her long black hair, and she's standing there sort of similarly clad with this dagger. And she's reading his future. Is he a hero? Is he meant to be a hero? Should I kill him and throw him in with the rest of them? Or, is he going to be my lover, or what's going to happen here? So as he's jumping, she reads his future, and she goes, okay, this one is a hero. So we're going to put him through all 3 initiations. So she takes off running through the forest. Now, what's amazing about the initiations that he has to go through, some of them, like one of the first ones is that he has to be able to handle a lightning strike without being killed by it. So he has to learn his magic, and he has to learn it from a woman. He has to learn how to cast a glamour, which means that if he's riding into a battle, even if there are only 2 of them, it looks like there are 10,000. Wow. So he has to be able to call on the supernatural forces. And after his years of training with her, he returns to Emer, and he's accepted by her, and he becomes the most famous of all the heroes. But I love this idea that, each of us holds something special, and that without the other, we can't fully be who we are or who we're meant to become, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. That's really cool. I'd never heard of him, but what a fascinating tale. And that's the most incredible thing about a lot of these stories and tales is they're just so symbolic for so much that's going on within each and every one of us. Just like another way to reflect, our own journey back to ourselves. Right.
Exactly. And, there's a tradition that you'll run into when you make your trip to Britain and Ireland, is that there's an old tradition of the bards, the ovates, and druids, but the bard actually learned 250 stories of their people. And, back then we didn't have podcasts, we didn't have internet, we didn't have TV and all this. So at that point, the bard was very important, because that was a way that we had of passing our history on to each other. And the druids, the old wise Celts, it was all oral. If you go to the place, you'll see the Ogham. There's an old Irish writing that looks a little bit like runes, and you'll find it in some stones. But they would learn the language of the trees, and so they would communicate that way. But that didn't really come until about I think it's the 3rd century. Maybe it was earlier. But when you go way back in time, what you have with these druids and the ovates, and the bards, is you have this oral history that's passed down. And the reason it's passed down is because, you can imagine, right? The Vikings are coming. You always have, there might be a snowstorm. Who knows? They're basically stories to remind us how we survive during the most difficult times and how to honor each other. Like, we need to honor the feminine because the feminine's life. It's very, and we forget that as we move into like the 5th century, we lose all those stories. Most of the women are demonized, unfortunately, by the church. It's interesting because the monks and priests wrote down, especially St. Patrick's monks and priests wrote down a lot of the stories, but the women are demonized. And so when I went back to collect the tales, I had to strip out the demonization and go back and find the original goddess. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it's a very interesting, and of course, as we were recording this, we just had St. Patrick's Day, so it seems appropriate. But it's funny how the sort of spread of Christianity really repressed a lot of this. And sought to sort of do away with all of this, sort of pagan history and tradition. And it's really fascinating how it's somehow, even though there's been so much repression of it over the centuries, it seems to be having its getting its time to sort of emerge from the ashes, if you will.
Yeah, well, I think we went through a time period that was the time of the sun god, and in the Celtic lands, Lu is the sun god, and so it was really easy. I think when the early Christians came in, and in Glastonbury, you have a lot of stories about Joseph of Arimathea showing up with the cup of Christ, which might have been Mary Magdalene. Some tales it's Mary Magdalene, and other tales it's the cup where the blood of Jesus is held, and with that mythic imagination, you go, oh yes, we understand. He's Lu, he's the god of light, and at that time, you could see that you would want to uplift, you would want to understand more transcendent energies, that you would want to understand the unification of the people, that you might want to return to peace, that you might want to stop all the bloodshed, the rape, and all these things that were going on. But I also think at that time there was something lost, and as beautiful as St. Patrick was, he did. There was a golden age going on in Ireland during the Dark Ages in Britain and most of Europe, and that was because there wasn't a Roman invasion there. There wasn't the sort of same level of chaos.
Right.
So he brought in a lot of light. He also went around and they talked about kicking out the snakes. There weren't any snakes there, but the snake is symbolic of the goddess tradition. So he went and systematically destroyed all the goddess temples, and wrote the stories down.
So sounds like a great guy to celebrate.
Well, and also it was the day that Bambo was celebrated, and I think that's why it became St. Patrick's Day. But you always see the leprechaun, right? You always see the fairy or something on St. Patrick's Day. The green and the red and the gold, and so the Bamba, they're triple goddess of. There are three goddesses that are the guardians of Ireland, and one is Eru, and people know Eru because there's Aaron, right, and then there's Bamba. And so St. Patrick's Day, and Fodla is the other one, but St. Patrick's Day is on actually Bamba Day, which was the day that they originally celebrated the goddess. So it's interesting. And
so they hijacked it.
Well, if you look at almost all, I think all of the holidays,
like Christmas. Yep, same thing with Christmas, right?
Yeah, well, sure, because you had Yule. And they have a wonderful 8-well calendar. And you can see that the people understood this calendar. I mean, if you go to Stonehenge or you go to Newgrange, people understood at that point. They were so connected to the earth. We've got away from this. And I think it's one reason it's important for us to remember our pagan roots. And I like to think of it more as our indigenous roots. What the Native Americans have in this country and in the United States is very similar to what the Celts were doing. The indigenous people of Europe were doing, right? So they understood the movement of the land. They understood that all of the elements were important and that we needed to live in harmony and balance with them. And so that's why at times like Samhain, which we celebrate as Halloween, we've kind of made it kind of funny, but then you actually crawl into these places, these cairns, you would crawl in, and for 3 days you would dream with the earth. You would dream, well, how is the earth dreaming? And how am I dreaming with her? What is my place here? Am I going to make it through another year? How am I dreaming with this world? And what do I need to do as I come forward? And so then they move from Samhain, the time of the ancestors, where you would really listen to those on the other side of the veil, and you would put food out for them, and you would listen to what your grandmothers and your grandfathers. Because they knew that the only reason we exist is because the grandmothers and the grandfathers have loved us enough to bring us into existence, and they were going to honor that. And so with their dreams intact, they would move into Yule or winter solstice. And a winter solstice in the old days was a celebration of the feminine. It was the dark time. It was the return of the womb, and it was the time to reflect, and it was the time to remember the light, so that the light of the new time could come. And so the fact that we get Christmas trees now and put lights on it, it's a very ancient tradition. It's actually pretty lovely. Your old the pine, which is actually one of the ancient Ogham symbols. It's one of the first trees to begin your journey to the enchanted world, to the land of light. It's pretty lovely,
Yeah, it's really fascinating when you look at sort of the mystical side of all these, what have become so commercialized. Christmas. I'm sure you've heard some of like the ideas of the red and white mushrooms representing. I don't know if you've heard this, suggested comparison, but the red and white mushrooms that the reindeer would eat, which would sort of put them on a psychedelic trip. You got this idea of them flying. And the shamans would come down the chimneys, because they'd be so snowed in at times. And I don't know if you've ever heard any of this. And I think it seems like it kind of mixes from even, ideas from different regions, right? Some of the things that I pieced together.
Absolutely. Well, if you go back far enough, the boreal forest from Russia extended all the way through Britain and Ireland, all the way through Canada and so forth. So that you had this. So the story of the flying reindeer is actually pretty beautiful, and they're one of the most ancient of the Celtic goddesses is known as Ellen, and she was. And I think in the Russian tradition, they would watch the reindeer. They would eat the mushrooms and they would pee, and then they would eat the pee. Right. And then they would have it was like an ayahuasca trip. They would go. They would fly into these other worlds, and so these mushrooms, you often see them, when you go to the land of the fairy folk, because you can, if you're truly a bard, you don't really need to take anything to go to the fairy world. But sometimes, if you haven't really opened up, some of those things will do it. But in the old days, there was and I actually tracked her, which was one of the most exciting times of my life, or one of those true experiences, where I felt like I was in a Tolkien novel.
Oh, I like the sound of this.
Ellen, if you look in Ireland for a minute, you've got Bridget, who was one of the springtime goddesses. She was celebrated for thousands of years, and you couldn't kill her off. So a lot of these people, like Bridget and Anne and so forth, they become biblical characters. They become saints. And Ellen actually becomes a Roman, the wife of a Roman soldier, Maximus. But if you go back far enough, you find a goddess who has antlers. I don't know if you know the horned god. A lot of times he's known as Cernunnos, and then his counterpart would be the Lady of the Woods, or Ellen. So she's an antlered, beautiful goddess. She's the equivalent of Venus or Aphrodite in the Celtic land. So she's the beauty, the queen of the land. And of course she was very demonized. And so I thought, okay, I really need to track this one and see what her story really is.
Right.
And she's not so easy to track. She's very elusive. And so I went to Wales, and I got all of these maps to find her trackways. That's called Sarn Helen, and really tried to find her somewhere in the forest. And a lot of these things, when you're tracking an ancient deity, and the only way you know if you encounter them is you feel a presence. That's you feel.
That's what I was about to say. When you say you're tracking them, you're really attempting to connect with the essence of that entity, which you feel is a real energy and a real entity. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, once you've done this long enough, you realize, okay, there are major archetypes. There's
Absolutely.
The mother archetype, right? There's the wise woman archetype. There's a king archetype. And these exist in all cultures and all time. And if you think about the old woman of the world, or the Merlin archetype, the wizard archetype, these are thousands and thousands and thousands of years old. So, and we get maybe 90 years if we're lucky. So they're huge energies. And if we're very respectful, we can tap into them. And almost all of us are tapped into an archetype, whether we know it consciously or not, and we're living out their story. So it's actually good to know what archetype you're tapped into and what story you're living out.
What's cool about this, sorry, I get excited because I just remembered, and I've mentioned it before on the show, going way back. I mean, this is episode almost 900, but episode 10 of a dear friend of mine, Eve, and her partner were on the show, and they make music and performance art together. And she tells the story of her doing these goddess performance art pieces that are all based off of these goddess archetypes. And for her, at first, she shares the story in episode 10. If you guys want to go back and listen, that it was just fun. It was just cool. It was creative. It was poetic. But then she had like a profound experience where she realized, like, during a performance, like, oh my gosh, hold on. These are real energies and real entities that are actually we're invoking and that are coming through, and in her case, in a dramatic fashion. So I instantly think of that when you started talking about this. I also started thinking about this show that I've been watching lately on Starz Network called American Gods. And it's these different gods, the old gods and the new gods, and how they exist based off of, like, the old gods are struggling because no one's giving them energy anymore, which is how they came into being, and then you have the new gods, which is like technology and stuff like that, who are becoming real powerful, and there's sort of this battle going on between them. But you just made me think of both of those things, and it really, I agree fully. It's like, these energies are all, I think that some of the legends of even, leprechauns or Sasquatch or, any sort of fairies or any of these things, we live in a multidimensional reality. We happen to have been tuned into one particular sort of view, looking through one lens, but I think some of the lines between other dimensions are even getting merged, where some of these fantastical, entities and beings and creatures actually exist, in my opinion.
I would say that's really true. And it's beautiful that you're tapped into that. One of the things I got excited about, actually, during one of these quests recently, I try to do one or two a year.
Wow. I want to come on one sometime with you. That sounds so fun.
They are fun. What happened last time I was speaking of Eve, I was at Avesbury, which is known as Evesbury. It's in the Celtic world. It's where the umbilicus of the Divine Mother comes into the planet, comes out in New Zealand, but it comes in at Avebury, and there's a stone circle that's a mile in circumference. And you can walk, and they say that these ancient chieftains and leaders and druidesses and so forth have put their energies into the stones, so that you walk through and you listen to the music of the stones as you walk through. And it's a very powerful, very, very powerful place. But it's where I learned to dowse. So years ago, I got so excited about dowsing, and I was, oh my gosh, you could really feel it. They're like 12-foot wide ley lines. So they're veins in the earth. And some places the more indigenous people understand that there are places where these lines cross, and then these are power points. And at those power points, it's easier to get in touch with the other worlds. And so Avebury happens to be one of them. So they actually act like telephones. So anyway, so last year I was there, and I was showing some people. I took a group of people, and they're all excited, and I'm showing them how to dowse. And but the ley lines weren't 12 feet anymore; they were 33 feet wide. And
wow.
I was shocked. And then I went to 3 other sacred sites. Same thing. So
they're growing.
They're growing. They're on. They're on. And it might have been, like you said, that when the goddess traditions went to sleep, that they went offline. And maybe energetically, that was supposed to be what happened. We were supposed to have the experiment of the sun god, and that's what we've done. Neil Gaiman is really on it, I think. But
right.
And I went to visit. When I was there, I studied with John Matthews, who's England's expert on Arthurian legend. He's written 200 books. He's amazing, brilliant guy, and talked to him about it also. And it does seem that these places are on, and could be, who knows, maybe we really are going to head into this golden age in 2025. That's the story, that we're supposed to be heading that way, and that
where did that come from?
That's from
where did
the
2025
Vedas.
come from? Really?
From the Vedas.
I hadn't heard that.
I also spoke to 3 Mayan priests who were very excited and really wanted me. He kept saying, "You need to tell the stories of the goddesses in your tradition, because people need to know that those energies have not been allowed to be on the planet. The goddess energies have not been allowed to be on the planet." And oh gosh, it was thousands of years. And that after 2012, these energies started to return, and in 2015, they became established. And it's interesting, if you look at the Me Too movement and what's happening, it might be that the Mayan priests are very correct, and they're definitely a people that know how to dream. They dream at night, and then they wake up in the morning, and they tell you what what the dream is, and then you dream together. And I remember one of them said, "Oh yeah, you're the white mare. When you come to me in the dreams, you're the white mare," which is lovely.
Wow.
Because in the Celtic tradition, the white mare is a goddess named Rhiannon, or there's another one called Epona, but she's the horse goddess, and she can and you can ride her. You can ride if you're lucky. If you're lucky and she likes you, you might be able to ride her between the worlds. So I would say right now it's very important to take time out. And there are places that are also opening up in the United States. We've got, in California, we have Mount Shasta, of course. And then all through, I've moved back to Virginia, because there are all these places that are starting to awaken in the Appalachian Mountains. And these are feminine vortexes that have been asleep for a long time, but they're waking back up. And and so we're being invited by the elementals and by the beings that love this earth to really pay attention. Pay attention so that we learn how to live harmoniously, but also so they aren't destroyed. Some of the nature spirits that you can get in touch with in Ireland and so forth, they're worried. They're a little bit worried, like G5. They're worried about these things. And so they want us to awaken and listen. And so we're at a critical time. I mean, 2025 is not that far off.
No, we're almost to 2020.
Right, exactly. So if our Taurus is supposed to become fully activated, then we better pay attention.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's exciting. So, and then people say, well, why do the old stories matter? And I say, well, when I go to the old stone circles and I meditate, I know that these beings, these presences have been through earth changes before. They've been through mega shifts. They know how to walk through it. They know how to walk through it and survive, Right. It's important.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
You just mentioned meditation and actually meditating at these stone circles. And I recently had Judy Hall on the show, who wrote the Crystal Bible books, and she leads meditations at some of these stone circles and was talking about it in that episode. If you guys want to, that was just, I don't have the number in front of me, but if you search Judy Hall on positivehead.com, you can find it. Yeah. And she was talking about, during those meditations, getting visuals of and connecting with the energies as well, and even a dragon energy she talked about, and from what I recall, and so I'm curious if that is something that you set out to do when you're doing these meditations. Is it the same for you? It's an intention to connect with specific energies and deities?
Yes, absolutely. Well, I went on my Ellen quest to find that ancient goddess, the antlered goddess. And when last time I was in Wales, actually, I was working with a variety of people to tap into the dragon energies, and the dragons are not. And maybe once upon a time there were things like dragons, but what a dragon is now, it's an earth energy, and you have some that are harmful, and you have some that are very positive and helpful, and a lot of them were pinned, like literally pinned down. They were intentionally pinned down. So what they were doing is they were turning off places, power points that the druids, these nematona where the druids would gather, because they wanted to literally turn off the telephone line. So part of what we've done is to go back and unleash those energies, and work intuitively with the dragon. So that would call that the heroine's journey. When you go back and you're listening to the energies of the land, and where an energy is struggling to awaken. I mean, especially because they're becoming so powerful now. You would go to those places. And what's important when you're doing that kind of dragon quest is that you stay really open, because your own energy field expands. We're standing on a place where the ley line's gone from 12 feet to 33 feet, and our own energy field's going to do that. So, if we our own superpowers start to wake up, then we need to go with it. And people, you mean a dragon is real? Oh yes, in the myth, in the enchanted lands, the dragon's very real. So when I take people on quests, I go, look, you can walk down a road, and maybe it's a dirt road, and you can walk down it, and you can see it's a dirt road, and you can see a tree, and you can see a bird. Maybe that's it. That's all you see. But if you're gonna start to enter the enchanted world, you've got to start seeing with the eyes of the poet, and so that you're seeing with the eyes of your heart, and you're going to expect things are not going to stay the same. You're not going to see them as you thought you should, and you might worry for a minute that you're losing it. And I don't, I'm not giving people drugs. This is not what's going on, but I'm inviting them to awaken their mystical child. So the mystical child's not afraid of seeing fairies, right? So or dragons, or they love it.
It talks openly about seeing them, right?
Yeah. So we're going back into the time when we were children, when the world was alive and the world was magic. We're going into an animated world. So then you walk down the road and you go, oh gosh, look, there's sparkles in the road, and look, there's a bird, and it's not just flying. Look, it's a wren. And the wren, maybe that's Merlin. And maybe Merlin, the way that the bird is singing to me, maybe Merlin has a message for me. Oh, and I need to follow. Oh, I need to go to this tree. Oh, look, it's an oak tree. Look, there's a doorway in the oak tree. Let's travel through and see what those of the other world want to share with us today, right?
That reminds me of have you seen Vladimir Kush art before?
Vladimir, yes, maybe.
Vladimir Kush.
Okay.
He is amazing. He has this big, there's down, 20 minutes from where I live in Laguna Beach, he has a big gallery, and he's very like, sort of like, Dali-esque, like modern Dali, and there's one epic, huge painting. His art is so amazing, where it's a door in an oak tree, and it's very Celtic looking, and so I think that instantly, made me think of that, and this idea that you're talking about, this idea of the world sort of being animated or off focus from the normal. It's sort of like it's interesting because you have this, virtual reality and augmented reality is becoming a thing, right? Coming online, so to speak, where we use technology to augment reality and sort of place things in our 3D environment that weren't otherwise there, but they appear there when you wear these special glasses or whatever. What you're talking about is like the organic version of augmented reality, right?
Exactly. And who knows, maybe technology in a way is just reflecting the other things that are going on. And it's great to take a period of time. I like I said, 3 or 4 times a year, I really try to do this where I turn everything off. I turn off and I love technology. I love the fact that you and I can speak about these things right now and record this, and it can be shared and people can hear it. It's fantastic. But you don't want to be controlled by it. We humans have something really lovely that technology doesn't have. We're creative beings. And so we can create ourselves into a huge mess, which we've done right now. We've created a wasteland, but we can also create ourselves right back out of it. But that means if we're going to create our way back out of it, that means that we have to go on our Grail quest. We need to go and find that spark of light that is our true self, that is our wise self. In the Welsh tradition, it's called the Gleifiosa, where the light comes on inside your own being, and that light is connected to the wisdom of all of creation. And so from that point, from the light of the Gleifiosa, we sit and we ask a question, and the answers come. So how do we deal with the pollution? Oh, here, this is a way. And how do we walk in the land with more love and awareness? Oh, this is the way. See? So it's all right there. We just have to wake up enough to remember the wondrous child. We have to wake up enough to ask the questions. Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I regular listeners know I don't quote the Bible a lot, but there's one scripture in particular that I love to quote or sort of, I probably don't say it exactly right, but it's essentially, unless you become like little children, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. And I love that whole, and it's how we started out this conversation, that truly is the path, isn't it? It's like we came here to have fun and to celebrate and to be joyous, and we've gotten so serious and heavy and stuck in this daily grind. And I was just texting with someone before we turned this on this morning. A friend of mine, very, very wealthy, saying, I'm a slave to, I don't have time to do all the things, but I'm a slave to my life, kind of, is what he's texting me. And I'm thinking, you're worth like $100 million. What are you've chosen to, you know what I mean? But he's just sort of having his own awakening, this particular example. And he's still kind of stuck in like, here it is, like super early, and he's at a meeting doing something work related, and he's texting me like, I got to find my way out of this and find more meaning in. And who could be more empowered to do that? Someone who's already done all that grind to sort of buy time, which is what money is energy, right? Does for a person. But I'm sort of just going on a tangent here, but becoming more childlike, not just focused on the goal line of monetary gain and work, but the soul line, right? Of really, really having some adventure and some excitement and play in our lives.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good biblical quote too. You know, you must become like a child to enter the kingdom of heaven. And there's something about that now. I mean, that was 2,000 years ago. Has it really changed that much? Because here we are. We're right at the beginning of a potential golden age where we could really flourish. We could become Atlantis all over again. And now, in order to walk into that place, yes, we have to become like children. We have to become like children and play and ask questions. And, you know, actually, if we want to be fully functional during this time, it really requires being 60% in our in-world, 60% connected to this, to our creative imagination that's awakening, expanding, that has the answers. And then we can give 40%, but that 40% that we give out is pure magic. You know, that's really something. We're really making a contribution to humanity. If we're 90% out in the world, that we're in a slave model. We're in the you know, we can you know it if you've somehow fallen into that slave model. And some people call it the ego, but what we're identified with at that point is false. And when we get to that point in life, that's the time to take the quest. That's the time where you go, okay, I've got to drop everything. What I'm identified is no longer serving me. It's time for me to shed my skin. It's time for me to go find a dragon, you know, laugh,
right?
go dance on some circus, some mountaintop somewhere, and get back. Right? Get back in touch. It's interesting with Burning Man, right? So you get back in touch with the. Right? Get back in touch with the person of light and then move forward again. And then you probably find you come back and you're more abundant, you're more successful, and you're happy. You know, you don't have that emptiness. That I think right before you're called on your quest, you'll find that people, they get a little depressed. They feel like there's a part that's missing and it gnawing at them. They, you know, there's something I'm not feeling the whole of myself. And that's not the time to go and get medicated. That's the time, you know, that's the time to go. That my soul
means you're on the verge of a breakthrough.
Yeah. Let's have a breakthrough. Yeah. Don't be afraid of the breakthrough. Don't be afraid of going mad. In the Celtic tradition, there's a time, even with Merlin, where Merlin goes mad in the forest for a period of time. Lancelot goes mad in the forest. Sweeney. And so there is that in the poetic world, there's a time where you take your year of madness or your 7 months of madness or something. And that's because your mind is remaking itself and you're starting to see the world in a way that you've never imagined before. And then when you come back out, you return quite often. You return as the wise one, as the storyteller, as the one that actually has something to share of value.
Right. All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting this podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on the show Missing Links, the incredible researcher Greg Braden explores all the biggest questions concerning who we are, where we come from, where we're going, by connecting the missing links between science and spirituality to complete our understanding of humanity's history and to better understand the interconnectedness of all things. Awesome, right? And that's just one example. As you guys constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Speaking of Arthur, you had mentioned the place where he was born, and so I wanted to, and you just brought up, Merlin and Arthur and Lancelot again here. So when you tell me everything that you know about the legend of King Arthur, because you referenced it like it's a real story, and so I just want to hear your whole download on the Arthurian legend.
Well, it might take a while to to explain all of it. But let's go into a little bit of it. We'll do a little taste of King Arthur. First of all, if you have a Celtic bloodline, this is the story that's probably going to be the most alive in you. Joseph Campbell talked about the hero's journey and the Arthurian legend being they're the myths that we know, and they're the ones that we easily tap into. I mean, for me, when I went to Cadbury Castle, I could tap right into Camelot. If I went to Tintagel, I could tap into the birthplace of King Arthur. It's really accessible for us. So King Arthur is really, he's in a way, he's the British Christ. He's the maybe in the Celtic tradition, you would say he's the king of light. And his purpose is to bring unification to the people. And in that age, we're thinking about the 5th century. We have the Celtic Church going on. Everything wasn't as black and white back then. And the church didn't at that point have that kind of, there was a period where the church went really dark. I mean, we still see it with these things that are emerging now. So we just have to be very clear about what is wonderful about a certain tradition and what, where the blind spots are. So I love stories, from all kinds of traditions. But in the 5th century, where we have the King Arthur stories, the Romans had left, and there was just chaos reigning in Britain. And the hope was that a leader would come forward, and that leader would bring unification to Britain. And he gets personified later. If you watch The Last Kingdom, have you watched the TV show The Last Kingdom?
Yes, I have.
There you go. So he comes forward as King Arthur. So so actually, Uhtred is my 25th cousin once removed. My first cousin 25 times removed. So I thought that was kind of fun.
Whoa, that's so cool. Uhtred is the main character in that, by the way, everyone. If you haven't seen it, it's a really good show on Netflix.
Yeah, he really, they really captured. They did a great job with that show. It's definitely worth watching, and you get to see just how violent that time period is. So, and in Last Kingdom, we're 9th century, so you're moving away from the times when the Druids were trained in Mona and Anglesey, and so you're moving away from the times of the sorceress when well, you can see it in the show, but it's fun. You have a little taste of some of the sorceresses that are left over, but So Arthur's job is to put together Camelot. His mother is Igraine, who some say is a lady of the lake. Other people say she's a priestess of Atlantis. And she comes to shore in Tintagel on the Cornish coast to this fantastic castle that's on the edge of the world there, of the Western world, where the waves of the Atlantic really beat and echo. And underneath this place, there's Merlin's cave. You can actually go there and walk through it and listen. And it definitely awakens your imagination. So his role was to create this unified Britain, and the way he goes about doing it is he's given when he marries Guinevere, who's a May Queen, and she gets, depending on what story you hear, she gets a little weaker over time. But in the very beginning, she's a goddess of sovereignty, and unless the king marries the goddess of sovereignty, the goddess of the land, the queen of the earth, he can't rule as king. So she actually has a very important role, and later everybody gets into the idea of Lancelot and Guinevere's love affair, but that's later. So if you take it further, if you go back to the 5th century, here he is married to the goddess of the land. It's very important, and her dowry is this round table. And now Merlin, in some of the stories, Merlin's the one that has created the round tables. Merlin's a really interesting character because if you think of his name, Mer, it means sea, and so he's like the deity of the sea. And there's in the old tales, some of the stars fell into the sea, and they emerged as the people of the Merline, and their role was to remember the blueprints of the earth, the sacred blueprints of the earth, So humanity could develop, and as Neil Gaiman would say, that we become the gods and goddesses, right? We
Right.
learn over time how to use our powers correctly, how to awaken to our essence, how to speak the world into being, and to live harmoniously together. Now, of course, if your powers awaken, you can abuse them too, which we also learn about, and that's part of the Arthurian legend. That's why Arthurian legends are so great, because somebody like King Arthur is always tested. Like, one of the first things that he has to do is travel into the underworld. The Celtic underworld's very different from hell. It's the Celtic underworld is where you might meet your ancestors, but you also meet these otherworldly beings, such as Gwyneth Neath, who hold the hallows. They hold the sacred treasures of Britain. In most stories, there are 4 sacred hallows, and other traditions there are 13. But so he has to ride into the other world to find the cauldron of Anun, basically the Holy Grail, right? So you get as you ride, you get tested. That's the hero's journey, where you get tested in the dark lands, where nothing's the same, where there's magic happening, where you have to use your sword of truth. You have to understand what's real and what's not. And when you travel in other worlds, you have to have awareness about that. And you always have to be respectful. And if you're lucky, you come out with your sacred gift and your sacred treasure. So,
right.
So the story of King Arthur, of course, is when all 150 knights go out in search of the Grail. They all are going into the other lands to find what is missing. In 5th century, the goddess is disappearing. She's going underground. And that's why my series is called Legends of the Grail, because we're going back to find the Grail maidens. Oh, please come back out of the well. Please come and speak. Please share the spiritual nourishment that my soul is longing for, that my soul is missing. Please bring it back to me, so that I remember my wholeness, my spark of light, my emerald. Bring it back to me. And so that's Arthurian legend in a nutshell. He probably was a real person. He probably was a Roman soldier. Like Uhtred in Last Kingdom, he's blended with several different people, but it's fine, because the idea is that when we hold our Arthurian archetype, it's kind of like holding our Christ consciousness archetype. We're holding a higher vision for ourselves and for each other and for the world. I'd say that's Arthurian legend in a nutshell.
Yeah, that's a lovely nutshell. Thank you for breaking that down. And, as we sort of wind down here a little bit, you've shared some epic stories. Now, the favorite stories that I have, I love all good stories, but ones that are personally magical in your own life, do you have a good synchronicity story, serendipity story, or positive paranormal story that has happened to you along your own quest, uncovering all of this magic folklore?
There's so many. I've had so many. The thing about...
Okay, well, you can just tell us all of them.
Okay.
I'll just keep it running for the next 24 hours. It'll be the longest podcast we ever had.
I probably could keep you going for 24 hours. When you go on a quest, this is the thing. You have to keep... You don't plan anything. We like to know on Wednesday we're doing this at this time and so forth. And when you're functioning in this world, you have to do that. But when you're really going on a quest, like the quest that I just went on in last September, looking for Ellen of the Ways, and I know I'm looking for something elusive. There's very little written about her that's really known, and how do I find her? Then all of a sudden, I started by going to see my friend John Matthews and his beautiful wife, Kathleen Matthews. They live in Oxford. And so I started just by familiarizing myself with this tale. Who was this woman? How did she exist? Was she really the first Santa Claus? Did she really fly through the world bringing us our gifts? So I think, female reindeer have antlers. So when we see the reindeer flying with Santa Claus, this is probably Ellen, originally Ellen.
Interesting. I never heard this.
This is Ellen flying through the universe, reminding us of our true gifts, our true essence, our true awareness.
Wow. Cool.
And one of the most, one of the things that I really loved most recently was going to La Crue. This was a few years ago now, but I went after I finished Legends of the Grail, and I was at that point looking for the old woman of the world who's known as the Kaliak. And she's an interesting one that you have to really respect, because she can show up in any guise. You don't know how she can show up as a cat. She can show up as an old hag.
Did you say her name is Kalia?
Kaliak. Or you can say Koilak or Kaliak. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, because it just rung out to me. You said it earlier, but it just hit me now. I mentioned Eve, and in episode 10, and it's with her and her partner, who is a musician, music producer. Kalia Scintilla is his name. So that is the actual episode. Is Eve talking about all the goddess stuff, and then I didn't even. Maybe that's where he got the name. I never even really thought of where that probably came from. I think scintilla is like scintillating. But that's an interesting little synchronicity right there.
She's a very ancient, and you can find her everywhere. She's in the Mayan tradition. She's in every tradition. You have the old woman of the world. In the Celtic land, she's called the Kaliach, and people fear her. So the spring goddess would be Bridget, and it's the light of Saint Bridget, and she was, before she became a saint, she was Bride or Bridget or Brigid, and so you can take her way back as the springtime goddess, and she's the one that carries the light for humanity. And her flame was actually relit in Kildare in Ireland, and you can go and take your candle and light your flame and carry the light with Bridget now. So she's a really powerful, beautiful, lovely energy to tap into, and you can also, there's a flame that's been relit for Bridget in Glastonbury as well. And so from in the old days, her flame never went out. They were, they're sometimes were known as the Vestal Virgins or the high priestesses of Avalon. Avalon is another world. It's another world that you travel into when you want to meet some of these deities, these ancient magical beings. You travel to Avalon. So, but in this particular case, I went up a hill, and the gate was locked. The gate was locked, and they said, "Oh," when I was at the bottom of the hill, they said, "Oh no, you can't go in because it's locked, and you have to go to this farmer, and then you have to, about 2 months before, you have to get the key." It was this whole story, and I said, "Oh well, if I'm supposed to meet the Kaliach, she'll be there, So I walk up, and I'm with a friend, and she's saying, "I don't really understand who this woman is. Who is the Kaliach?" I'm like, "Oh, well, you have your tradition is Celtic. She's Gaia. We know her as Gaia. She's the she's Mother Earth." Mm. And right. So as we walk up, I realized that I could feel the presence of the old woman of the world, and my husband and his friend were way up ahead of us, and we weren't expecting to be able to get into the cairn. We just were walking along and tapping into this presence, and I'm like, "Look, she's the rocks, she's the trees, she's everything. And we can, one day our body's going to return to her. Our clay, the clay of our body will return, and she'll hold us in her lap, and she'll make sure that our spark of light will return to our special star, wherever that is, or wherever our star needs to go next. And so she'll care for us." And so she's walking along, she's like, "Oh, I feel her." And she starts to cry. She has these tears running down her cheeks. She's, "Oh, I can feel her presence." And I hear my husband yelling. He's absolutely yelling. And I'm thinking, "Uh-oh." So we run up the hill to the cairn, where the metal door that was locked, is opening for us.
What?
And
on its own,
it just decided to open up. And terrified.
What? So it was completely locked. It unlocked and just started opening magically.
It just magically opened. And, none of us tried to figure out rationally why that had taken place, or, if it had been locked correctly, or, whatever. It didn't, at that point, it didn't matter, because the gateway was opening, like literally opening. So,
wow.
So we were able to go. And when you go into these places, you really have to go. You have to be respectful. So we go in, we're squeezing through. the only reason we could see anything is we had cell phones. So thanks for technology. We could turn our flashlights on, and we could see etched into the walls. And you can see why it's locked off, because it's a very sacred place. But there are all these spirals and circles and different etchings, different little star beings, little spaceships, all sorts of things etched into the walls. And so you squeeze through, and then you're in the middle of the womb of the Cailleach. And there are three circles. There's a central room, and then there are three other rooms. And so we sat in there and meditated and could feel the warmth. And it was funny, the fellow that was with us was going, "This is weird. This is February, and it's warm in here." And I said, let's sing with them, because you could hear tones, you could hear sound. There were sounds coming from the stones. Somehow the sounds were coming from the stones. So I started humming, and my husband was humming, and my friend started humming. She started dancing, and you could feel subtle. It's a very subtle thing, but here we are. We're dancing with the Cailleach, in her womb, in her place, in her telephone.
Wow.
Where she can hear us. She can hear our dreams. And so we were dreaming with her. And it was lovely. So we were in there for maybe half an hour, and then it went quiet, went cold. It was done. She was gone. And we came out, but we all danced on the hilltop. We were all blissed out of our minds, And again, we didn't take anything. We were touched by the presence of this ancient force that's awakening. The feminine presence is awakening. So the masculine and the feminine can dance together and create a new world.
That is such a beautiful, beautiful story. I know you said you go quite often and you lead groups. I know who I would like to go with at some point. I wanted all the gates to swing open when I show up, so I'm bringing you.
Okay, well, you'll have to come. It's really lovely, and depending on what part of the world you're drawn to. And quite often, if you've done a DNA test, or your family tells you the stories of your people, and you go, it's because it's your grandmothers and your grandfathers that are opening the doors up for you. They want you to remember who you are. They want you to live the fullness of your being. And I think that's what often happens on these quests. When we go, and I like to keep it 10, 12 people, keep it very small, and so people can really enter their mythic imagination, that they really return with something special, whether they're a lot of times writers go, or poets, or people who are really actively in the process of waking up, and their clairvoyance, their clairsentience, their clairaudience is coming online. And there are places you can go, like Mona, like in Wales, there's an island there called Anglesey, and there's still the old places where the druids would do their initiations, and you can go in and start to awaken some of your clear seeing in those spots. So it can be really a lovely, sacred activity, a quest to discover the true self, the true nature, so that you can come back and really be a huge contribution to humanity.
Yes, I definitely. That sounds like such an epic odyssey, and I'm just about to launch a new show called Optimistic, spelled MYSTIC, and it's going to be video production, TV style show, late night style talk show, and I just have been designing the logo for it, and. My dear friend who actually edits the show chose, as he was coming up with versions of it for me, incredible graphic designer, the Celtic rope as the outside of this logo. And I'm really glad after this recording that we just chose that like last week. It definitely ties it all together, pun intended. And this has been so magical and so cool. What is the best way for people to connect with you that want to continue to follow you, your work, get your books? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to find. You can go on my website, AynCatesSullivan.com, and it's AYN. So there are not too many AYNs, but AynCatesSullivan.com. So usually you say Ayn if you're just Ayn means the light in the Celtic tradition. So anyway, so you can find me AynCatesSullivan.com. And if you want to see if there are quests, I don't have any right now, but next year there'll be some you can look at the events page. I have all kinds of talks right now. This has been my year of talking about my books and sharing the stories. And so there are loads of, if you want to listen to the story of Danu or Kesa or any of these stories, you can go on and listen to some audios. And then I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. You can follow me and see what's going on. And every year I work with a few people who are in the active process of awakening. So I work with them as like guide, mentor, help with the awakening of Gleifiosa, and I love this process. And I also work with a few writers who are working with their mythic imagination. So you can find me, and I have a contacts page, so you can see emails and phone numbers and so forth on there. So I hope some people will come and enjoy and join in the quest.
Yes. I definitely want to put one together or get involved in the next one that you put together, sometime, in the next year or so. I've really wanted to take my mother and my son over, and I feel like this, for me, just going and visiting like the normal museums or what's the standard way to visit Europe it'd be cool, but it's not the same as something like this, going and really going on a true epic odyssey, if you will, and tapping into these magical energies. So I will definitely be in touch with you to coordinate that in the coming year or two.
That's good. If people have a little,
sorry, go ahead.
If they want to have a taste, they're not ready for the full quest yet, but they want a taste. In my books and Legends of the Grail and in Heroines of Avalon and Other Tales, at the end of each story, there's a way to meditate and to start tap into these energies. So you do a meditation and you start to develop your sense of who your guardians are, who your Celtic friends are. So there are ways that you can start to do that.
I love that. So cool. Well, I do have one final question here for you. And the question is this. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life according to Ayn Cates Sullivan?
Well, the meaning of life is, I really believe it's to wake up to who you are, to really find your true nature, to allow the skin that's not you to fall away, and for you to truly find the essence, all the gemstones, the diamonds, the energies of your true self, to allow those to come forward, to emerge, so that you act as your true nature, your creative divine being, the spark that's aligned with the truth of life.
You are so poetic. I absolutely have adored this chance to connect with you. Thank you, Ayn, so much for taking the time to come on and share all of your epic stories and wisdom.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I hope we continue.
We shall. Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. Before we sign off, I wanted to let you all know that we have finally created the Game with the Universe on our website, where you can choose the first number that comes to your mind, and it'll pull up that episode number of the podcast. I've been saying this is a great way to co-create synchronicity and magic with your higher self for quite some time by doing this manually. But now, if you go to positivehead.com/YO Universe, there is a super fun and simple interface to play this game with your higher self. I firmly believe just by setting the intention to play in this way, it opens up the door for magic, and it's a synchronistic way to hone in on nuggets of wisdom out of the huge catalog of episodes that are specifically appropriate for you at this time in your journey to becoming the next greatest and grandest version of yourself. And it also makes for a super fun way to engage and invite friends, family, people on social media to check out the podcast as well. So be sure to check out positivehead.com/YOUNIVERSE, and be sure to tell all your friends so they can play a game with the universe, which also helps the show to reach new people, which I greatly appreciate. And as a quick reminder, be sure to also check out positivehead.com/transformation if you're curious to learn more about Purium superfoods and why I take them every day. On this journey of becoming the next greatest and greatest version of ourselves that we have all embarked upon, I can't stress the importance of managing your physical vibration enough. And quite honestly, Purium has put together the simplest plan I've found to do so, and I'm sincerely excited to share it with all of you. Otherwise, as you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.